Wild Israel takes you to the lowest place on earth, the Dead Sea, 1,400 feet below sea level. Discover the animals that survive around this body of dead salt-saturated water, that endure the barren landscape, impassable cliffs, and temperatures that soar above 118 degrees Fahrenheit. Investigate salt caves plunging 330 feet into the ground and sudden flash floods that rage through mighty canyons. In Israel, history is everywhere. Religion and cultures have intersected over the centuries. But the country is less known for its fascinating wildlife and terrain. Explore in Israel most people never see. From Mediterranean beaches to lush waterfalls. From colorful coral reefs to green mountains and ancient desert landscapes. And from snowy peaks to the world's lowest sea at the foothills of the Judean desert, where rare and unexpected animals make their home. Deep inside the country lies the Judean desert, 53 miles long and 15 miles wide. Running through this barren stretch of land is the Great Rift Valley, which reaches from Mozambique in Africa to Turkey. At the bottom of one of the valley's deepest faults lies the lowest place on Earth, the Dead Sea. The Dead Sea is one of the saltiest lakes in the world. Any animal that dares to drink here will suffer a painful death. Only minuscule quantities of bacteria and microbial fungi are present in this water. The salt content varies from year to year and currently hovers at 34%. The salt content of the Mediterranean is only 3.5%. A sail along the Dead Sea's coast reveals a surreal underwater landscape. These salt pillars have crystallized around currents of fresh water rising up from underground springs. At the edge of the water, these surprising crystallized forms. Shining, beautiful salt sculptures, stalactites and stalagmites. Every branch and trunk that is swept into the water becomes a salt sculpture. Each stone becomes an anchor for the creation of salt crystals. This is a beautiful yet deadly world. West of the sea, above a steep cliff hundreds of feet high, looms the Judean desert. 15 miles wide, it stretches to the foothills of the Judean mountains. This mountain range has created two different worlds. On the western side, thanks to moisture generated from the Mediterranean, enough precipitation falls to sustain a wide range of plant life. But as the moist, cool air mass crosses over the Judean peaks, it warms up and evaporates, so virtually no rain falls on the eastern side, as it is blocked by the mountain range. This phenomenon has created a rain shadow desert, dry, harsh, and yet some creatures have made the desert their home. How is this possible? And why do they choose to live right here? The view from above reveals, even at the peak of summer, a shocking patch of green. Dozens of small springs flowing into clear pools. Here, at the edge of the Dead Sea, the lowest place on Earth, the hottest place in Israel, is the Einot Tzukim region. The water comes from rain that fell years before on the Judean mountains, and eventually flowed eastwards underground until it reached the coast of the Dead Sea. This slow underground flow has created a paradise in the desert. In the pools at Einot Tzukim swim schools of various species of tilapia. The tilapia feed on the water plants, which thrive in these ideal conditions of abundant water and heat. This tilapia aggressively defends the hole it dug in the pool bed, to which it hopes to attract a suitable partner during the mating season. The springs also sustain lush tamarisk thickets, which in turn hide and shelter an entire world. Among the tamarisk branches lives an ant community of builders and sophisticated farmers. Weaver ants are a tropical species that live only in hot regions. They build and weave a palace for the entire community from silk threads. The nest is well padded, and silk screens protect and completely isolate it from potential threats. The adult ants cannot spin threads, so they exploit the spinning talents of their young larvae. At 2 weeks, just before it becomes a cocoon, the larva body is full of precious silk. Using their jaws, adult ants carry each larva to the building site. There, the larva secretes strong, thin threads that are added to the construction. When the larva has exhausted its supply of silk, adults return it to rest, and another larva is taken to work in its place. In addition to building the nest, the weaver ants are busy building special enclosures for aphids and bugs. The aphids and cicadas are nurtured just like a herd of sheep or cattle. They drink fluids from the tamarisk trees and secrete a sweet liquid called honeydew, a highly nutritious food source for the ants. When an ant needs to feed, it uses its antennae to tickle the aphid or cicada, which then offers up a drop of the nutritious sugar water. In return, the ants care for them, clean them, and watch over them to make them stay. And they are not alone here, in this complex world on the edge of the Dead Sea. Far above, in the tamarisk treetops, are some strange-looking large balls of twigs. In fact, these are nests. Who would choose to live near the Dead Sea, where the temperature can hit 118 degrees Fahrenheit? Unique to the region, these are Dead Sea sparrows. Before the mating season, they settle in colonies, only in the hottest and most extreme areas, but always near flowing water. The male chooses the location and builds by himself. Once the nest is built, he stands on the nest or next to it, singing and flapping his wings for hours on end to attract a female. This female joins him. They will line the nest together, and she will lay her eggs inside. Then she broods alone. The optimal temperature for the eggs is 95 degrees Fahrenheit. Higher temperatures would kill the embryos. From time to time, she leaves the nest for a soak. When her feathers are wet enough, she returns to drip over her eggs and the nest. The walls are well aerated, and when wind blows between the twigs, it cools the wet eggs. This is cooling incubation. It means the difference between life and death. If the river dries up, the parents must abandon the nest, and the chicks will die in the heat. But here among the springs on the edge of the Dead Sea, even during summer, fresh water is plentiful, and the nesting success rate is high. West of Einot Sukkim, a cliff rises up hundreds of feet, gouged by steep, deep canyons that drop from the Judean desert to the Dead Sea. These canyons have provided a hiding place and a refuge for humans and animals. From King David, who fled for his life, to the Masada rebels who fought the Roman army. High in the cliff above Einot Sukkim, in a cave, the Dead Sea Scrolls were found, the oldest surviving sections of the Bible. These cliffs and the caves have also sheltered a rare predator, the Arabian leopard. It's the smallest leopard in the world, but is still powerful enough to hunt rock hyrax, ibex, and domesticated camels and donkeys. Just 1 hour away from busy modern Jerusalem in the late 70s, 12 leopards were seen wandering these canyons, drinking from the spring water at Einot Sukkim and terrifying the desert animals. These rare leopards were captured with still cameras in a very few photos. In 1980, astonished by the sightings, researchers hid in cliffs to try to observe these large predators and document their movements. But over time, and for reasons not entirely clear, the leopards vanished from sight, perhaps repelled by even minimal contact with the modern world. Only an occasional footprint or a possible sighting give hope that one or two are still here. And that maybe one day more might return. As the leopard community vanished from the Judean desert, another predator claimed the top of the food chain. The striped hyena. In fact, this is the largest predator in Israel, reaching close to 100 pounds. The hyena lives a solitary life, feeding on abandoned carcasses or hunting weak and sick animals. It's capable of eating the equivalent of 5 whole chickens in one meal. Its sense of smell is highly developed, and the hyena can locate carcasses across great distances. Western burial practices were founded in this region. It's possible that the ancient custom to place a large stone over a grave stemmed from the desire to keep hyenas from digging up the body. Many cultures fear hyenas and imbue them with negative qualities, in part because they eat carcasses, but also because of their menacing appearance. High shoulders, front legs longer than the back legs, and broad, strong jaws that can crack large bones. This strange build, like a crane, allows it to drag carcasses heavier than its own weight. The hyena's only enemies are human, some of whom see hyenas as supernatural, evil creatures. It's not uncommon for drivers to run hyenas over as they wander along roads looking for carcasses. This female hyena lives alone throughout the year. A few months ago, she met her partner, who left after the mating. Now, at the end of the summer, she alone looks after her cubs in her den in the canyon. She hunts and scavenges from evening until morning, often covering tens of miles per day. And out here in the Judean desert, she is not the only hunter on the prowl. This pack of wolves is also searching for food. Like the hyena, they're mostly nocturnal. Up on the desert's highlands, a dead sheep from a Bedouin's herd is a good reason to celebrate. The wolves devour as much as possible. Each one can eat up to 18 pounds in one meal. They eat fast because all too often dinner gets interrupted. Satisfied and full, they do not need to fight for the remains. Just smelling the hyena makes them give up and leave. For 3 months, the striped hyena brings her cubs what they need to eat. It's already morning, and they wait impatiently at the den's entrance for their mother. During the first 3 months of their life, the cubs don't stray from the den. As they grow, they spend more and more time outside, staying close to the entrance. They have plenty of time for social interaction, playing biting games and honing their wrestling skills. Soon they'll join their mother in the search for food. But even while eating meat, they continue to suckle until they're 6 months old. At that age, they start roaming on their own along the Dead Sea shores and the canyons, looking for food. No easy task in this sweltering landscape. And here in the Judean desert, one location is most forbidding of all. Towering 820 feet high, Mount Sodom is the single most arid and harsh area in the region. For this mountain consists of a large lump of salt that was forced upward by tectonic activity. The meager rains that fall here gouged the soft salt rocks, creating tall chimneys whose bases stand at the same level as the Dead Sea. Underground rivers left behind canyons and caves of spectacular beauty. While conducting a study, scientists climbed to the peak before descending to a depth of some 330 feet in darkness, pierced only by flashlights. The caves are dangerous. Researchers have to be prepared for frequent underground avalanches. For this reason, the caves aren't open to tourists. This is the longest salt cave in the world. It splits off and twists for over 3 miles. The mountain contains even more natural hallways and passages, as well as underground lakes. Above the water, the flashlight reveals glittering salt stalactites and white gypsum crystals hanging like threads of silk. Even during the summer heat, a cool atmosphere prevails in the cave. It takes a huge effort to return up to the surface. Outside, the summer heat, soaring to 118 degrees Fahrenheit, evaporates and desiccates the soil and sea. Not far from Mount Sodom hides a vibrant world, completely unlike the Dead Sea's arid coastline. Freshwater springs burst through rock to create flowering rivers and oases. Walls and humid cliffs are adorned with mosses and ferns, even at the height of summer. Abundant water combines with high temperatures to create localized tropical moist conditions in the canyon's hideaway, isolated from the surroundings. This incredible alchemy allows plants of the humid subtropics to grow alongside desert plants. This, in turn, has opened up a lush new world in the desert. This tropical niche represents a real heaven for Tristram's starlings. The call of the Tristram starling is now heard throughout the Judean desert. In late summer, after the nesting season, when they lived in canyons in isolated pairs, the Tristram starlings gather into large, noisy flocks, looking for the fruits of desert plants, insects, and crumbs of food. The birds will live as a group from now until the end of the winter. Autumn approaches in the Judean desert. Temperatures drop. The sun becomes more merciful. Muffled knocking sounds begin to echo among the cliffs throughout the day. For the desert's inhabitants, these sounds herald the coming autumn. Before the mating season, the male ibex compete to determine their status in the herd. In early autumn, it looks like a game, not a real fight. But as the days pass, the confrontations become serious. Only the strongest will mate with the females and bring their offspring into the world. Often, a simple staring match suffices. In this case, the strongest male with the longest horns wins without a fight. But if the contestants are equal in size, a true battle will take place until one is defeated. These blows would cripple a human. Most other animals would be badly injured, but not the ibex. Their strong skulls help protect them from the brute force of these impacts. The loser appears to feel exhausted. And the winner prepares himself for courting. Throughout most of the year, the males live in a separate herd. Only now do they approach the female herd. The male ibex raises his upper lip and sticks out his tongue to smell and taste the female's readiness. He circles them for days, waiting for them to come into heat. The female ibex is in heat for only a few days, and if the male misses his opportunity, someone else will take his place. Meanwhile, at the peak of a rocky slope, this young male managed to get close to a female grazing on lichens. He is delicate and hesitant, and she's not bothered at all by his awkward courting. Nothing will develop from this immature relationship. When she comes into heat, a strong male already by her side will fight off any competitors. At the end of the mating season, the males will leave the female herds, and all the pregnant ibex will winter together in peace. These cliffs and caves near the Dead Sea look desolate. But as the desert cools, they offer a haven for countless other creatures. Vast colonies of 2 species of mouse-tailed bats seek shelter in these caves during the winter months. Surprisingly, they even hibernate here. They're the only mammals known to hibernate in consistently warm temperatures. They migrate along the length of the Syrian-African fault line. At the end of the winter, the males and females meet for a short period in a special mating cave, and then in the summer migrate north along the deep Rift Valley. In their summer home in northern Israel, they live in separate caves, one for females and one for males. The females need an environment 6 degrees Fahrenheit hotter than that of the male habitat. Just before nightfall, a few scouts leave the entrance of the male cave. They scan the landscape quickly and return with the all clear. Within seconds, thousands of bats spread out across the valley to hunt down their prey. The return to the cave is gradual, after each bat has fed enough. Before temperatures drop and the winter rains approach, the mouse-tailed bats migrate back to the Judean desert. Winter rains in the Judean desert are rare, but west of the desert on the Judean mountains there is rain, and a few times a year the range is even covered in snow for several days. The rain and melted snow don't penetrate the soil or the rocky cliffs. They run eastward, flowing into rivers, and, without warning, build into stormy flash floods that cross the entire Judean desert. Along their path, the floods pound through deep canyons in the desert highlands and plunge hundreds of feet in waterfalls down to the depths of the Rift Valley. The flash floods come each winter, but their timing is impossible to predict. Sometimes the floods form from strong local rainfall, but most of the floods are caused by rain that falls far away on the high mountains. On these occasions, the sun can be shining in the Judean desert, the sky a pure blue, and seemingly out of nowhere, a powerful flood can strike. Floods in the Judean desert are intense, even deadly. Each year they block roads and carry away animals, and very occasionally even people to their death. Each flood brings with it water of a different color depending on the drainage area and the materials it collected on the way. The floodwaters descend and reach the Dead Sea, forming large deposits of sediment. Despite the flood's destructive power, the desert's inhabitants prepare themselves and wait for this water for the entire year. The winter floods are a lifeline for the desert plateau and the coastline of the Dead Sea. Every rocky niche, crack, or crevice becomes a waterhole that holds the precious liquid of life for a few days or even weeks. After the winter floods, the desert plateau bursts into life. For the mountain gazelles, this is a glorious period of bounty. They graze in small herds among the carpets of flowers and reborn meadows. During this period, as in centuries past, tribes of wandering shepherds come with their camels, sheep, and goats, enjoying the abundance of greenery that covers the soft hills. During these lush spring days, the green bee-eater hovers in the desert landscape, digging its nest in vertical walls. Alert to all threats, the male brings food to the female and invites her outside to eat. A curious blackstart that approaches the nesting site is pushed back aggressively. A foreign bee-eater that approaches the nest receives the same treatment and is expelled from the area. The two parents work around the clock, hunting bees, wasps, and other insects to feed the chicks, hoping they will survive past the spring. In this season, the animal world seems transformed. Even the ibex are acting differently. The males who fought in the autumn now walk together in peace and harmony, the earlier tension forgotten. The female ibex gave birth at the end of the winter, each one alone in a rocky refuge. After only a few days, they were back with the herd, each female ibex with a kid or two. During the daytime, the ibex kids are grouped in nurseries and minded by a few adult females. All the other mothers are busy grazing. The atmosphere is playful as the kids practice jumping, running, and headbutting. Each female knows her own kid intimately and returns to suckle it, and only it, every few hours. The suckling is very quick, only 20 seconds. Just a few days old, the kids already wander and climb the desert cliffs without a worry. Sturdy and nimble, their short, strong legs well adapted to the terrain. Only a few predators can threaten them, but if that threat appears, the ibex mothers move to defend their kids with their short, sharp horns. After only a few weeks, the kids take their first taste of the foliage. Their diet gradually changes until they stop suckling at about 4 months. The ibex share the same rocky area and the same acacia trees with hyraxes. The ibex eat the low leaves, standing on their hind legs to reach as high as possible. The hyraxes are light and agile, able to reach the soft leaves at the ends of the branches. They gather their food, careful to avoid the acacia thorns. In the spring, the rock hyraxes reproduce. The newly born young are open-eyed, ready for life, and active within a few hours after birth. They're raised collectively by the mothers. The family, blessed with many cubs, enjoys the spring warmth and spends long hours sunbathing and playing among the rocks. Zoologists have evidence that hyraxes are closely related to elephants. It sounds strange, but anatomical traits support this hypothesis. The similarity between the tusks of the hyrax and those of the elephant, the internal testes in the males, and the female nipples, which are located between the forelegs. However, the female hyrax, unlike the female elephant, has an extra pair of nipples between her hind legs. The cubs jump from nipple to nipple. While the mothers raise the cubs, the father stands on a high observation point to keep watch. He uses a loud song that declares the group's ownership of their territory, and, when necessary, warning shrieks that send his family scurrying to take shelter. The hyraxes also listen for warnings from their neighbors. From a great distance comes a sharp warning shriek, sounded by 2 adult ibex. When the shriek is heard, this small world freezes. The hyraxes have good reason to be afraid. Among these cliffs nests the giant golden eagle, always on the hunt. The eagle needs to feed his chicks in the nest, and a dawdling hyrax will be snapped up by his strong talons. The eagles rear their 2 chicks with fierce devotion, ranging far and wide to bring them partridges and doves, hyraxes, hares, and foxes. This eagle has captured a live tortoise that even now struggles to get away from this high-altitude death trap. With plentiful food, the chicks grow rapidly, and their white down is replaced by dark plumage. The maturing chicks begin to display the necessary aggression. They don't need their parents' help anymore to tear their meal. They even compete with each other for bigger portions. The eagles are monogamous and mate with the same partner for many years, maybe for their entire life. They regularly repair their nest with twigs and human garbage. Research has revealed that some golden eagle nests are active for hundreds of years and serve generations of these raptors. At the age of 2 months, the chicks are nearly ready for their first flight and practice flapping their wings and jumping in the nest. Even after they leave the nest, they maintain contact with their parents and live in the cliffs surrounding the nest for another 4 months. The lofty cliffs of the Judean desert are almost inaccessible. Their treacherous structure kept hidden a number of cliff dwellers. Blandford's fox lives here, seldom seen. This is a small and very rare fox, weighing only 3 pounds. These foxes live in pairs for life. At night, they go out together to look for caper fruits and edible arthropods like scorpions. More than 10 species of scorpions live in the Judean desert, all nocturnal. Under the night sky, they scout for small reptiles and insects, trying not to fall prey themselves. The steep hideaway provides shelter for another surprising animal. His calls echo within the canyon. A desert tawny owl and her chicks. This is the first time ever that a desert tawny owl and her 2 chicks are being caught on film. The mother hunts and gently feeds the chicks on the rocky ledge with scorpions and large spiders, geckos, and other small animals. Only at the end of 2014 was it determined that this owl is actually a separate species, Strix hadorami. Among the rocks at the bottom of the canyon lives a family of bushy-tailed jareds, rodents with a magnificent tail. The mother suckles her tiny pups in the burrow. But the father of this little family will never return. Looking for food at night exposed him to the owl's sharp eyes. A few minutes ago, he was caught and delivered to the chicks on the rocky ledge. Until today, the 2 chicks ate small arthropods, and this is the first time they are rewarded with a large rodent. The maturing chick has difficulty swallowing it. But finally succeeds, and the feast disappears into his belly. The death of one animal means life for another. In the summer, the chicks reach maturity and leave the nest. During this difficult dry period, each one fends for himself. The Dead Sea is drying up. Its water level, 1,400 feet below the sea, is dropping by 3 feet each year. The Jordan River was once the Dead Sea's main source of water. Now the river is pumped, mainly for domestic and industrial use in Jordan and Israel. Very little water now reaches the sea. At the same time, both Israeli and Jordanian quarrying operations extract minerals from the Dead Sea, like potassium and bromide, present in very high concentrations. To do this, the sea's water must be intentionally evaporated. The dropping sea level creates grave and unforeseen ecological problems. As the salty water recedes, it is replaced by fresh groundwater. This dissolves the salt layers in the deep soil, creating large underground hollows. The upper layer can then collapse suddenly into these hollows and create deep pits known as sinkholes. In recent years, about 1,200 sinkholes have developed along the coastline of the Dead Sea. These pits are inhospitable to both animal life and agriculture. Israeli geologists are trying to predict the location and timing of the next sinkhole collapse. They're even examining ways to stop the soil collapsing, such as diverting water to the Dead Sea and restoring previous water levels. However, a safe way to resolve the issue hasn't been found. Scientists also worry that their efforts may also cause some further damage to the sensitive desert ecosystem. Treacherous, yet beautiful. Barren at times, and then lush. Remote and teeming with life. The Dead Sea and the Judean Desert have developed into one of the world's most unique ecological wonderlands. And hopefully, they will continue to endure and flourish for all the following generations of animals and plants to come.